Meanwhile, schools in Beijing reopened today, but only partially for final year senior high students, as well as teachers and administrators. These students have to sit their entrance exams this year.
To share more on what happened on the ground is the Straits Times China Bureau Chief Tan Dawn Wei. She joins us live from Beijing. Dawn, hi Dawn. Now some students are back at school after 3 months of online lessons at home. From what you observed, how did the day pan out? Tell us about the mood of these returning students as well as the precautions in place.
Yeah, so Beijing today reopened schools for just the final year students of its senior high school. These are students who will be taking the all-important, the make or break college entrance exam, or better known as the Gaokao. Originally, the exam was slated for June, but because of the coronavirus outbreak, the Education Ministry decided to push it back a month to July 7th and 8th. Schools have spent more than a month getting ready to reopen because of very strict regulations by the Beijing municipal government. For instance, all teachers have to be screened for the coronavirus, which they did last week, and all students will have to go when they go into the school, they would have to be screened by facial recognition technology and show their mobile health code before they are allowed to enter the gates of the school. And in school, classes have also shrunk. Only 25 students are allowed in a classroom, and meal times are staggered, so you don't get all students crowding the canteen at once. So some of them will eat in the canteen, and then they will have to sit apart, and some will eat in the classrooms. And all teachers and students have to wear face masks at all times when they are in school and have their temperatures checked twice a day. So students we spoke to say that they are excited about finally going back to school after 3 months of doing home-based learning. They say that they miss the physical interaction with their teachers and their friends, and obviously a classroom environment is more conducive for interaction and engagement, and more importantly, help motivate these students because teachers are physically there to supervise them and to answer their questions.
Of course. So Beijing and Shanghai are among the last of China's cities to allow schools to resume. So, Dawn, what's the timeline for a full reopening of schools in these cities?
Yes, Beijing and Shanghai are probably the most cautious of all cities and provinces in China reopening and reopening schools. Practically all provinces have reinstated schools since starting March the 9th. Hubei province is the last of the provinces, and it will let final year senior high school students go back to school on May the 6th. In addition to the final year high school students, Shanghai today also let its final year middle high school students go back to school. And these are students who also have to sit for an entrance exam to get into high school. For Beijing, that will happen only on May the 11th. As for the rest of the students, return dates do vary from province to province. Some, like Chongqing, have already announced that students of all grades can return to school by the end of May. But the idea is really to let students return in batches and not all at once.
Now, Dawn, as we saw just now, all COVID-19 patients in Wuhan have been discharged. That's a milestone. Was it commemorated in any way?
No, not like how they celebrated the lifting of the lockdown on Wuhan on April 8th. So the National Health Commission yesterday announced that there are no more coronavirus patients in Wuhan hospitals. The last patient was a 77-year-old man who was released from hospital at noon yesterday. And the last patient who was severely ill was well enough to go home on Saturday. And this patient was also said to be the last severe case in Hubei province. But it should also be made clear that there are previous COVID-19 patients who are still being treated for other conditions in hospital, conditions that had come about because of the coronavirus. For instance, there are some patients who no longer have the virus, but are still in intensive care for kidney problems and other ailments arising from the coronavirus in at least 3 hospitals in Wuhan. And the patients who have recovered and gone home may also still need further care.
Well, Dawn, the rise of imported cases in China has led to foreigners being the target of discrimination. You wrote about a particular group, the African population in Guangzhou. So, what's going on there and how has the government responded?
So China saw a rise in anti-foreigner sentiments sometime in March when the tide turned and it was getting an increasing number of imported cases. Even though the Health Commission explained that 90% of these imported cases were returning Chinese nationals who were escaping the outbreak in other countries, I think the news and the images of outbreaks and lockdowns around the world and the soaring number of infections worried the Chinese because they had, after tremendous effort, only just gotten a handle on the domestic situation. And what happened in Wuhan, not in Wuhan, I'm sorry, what happened in Guangzhou was that there was a cluster in the African community there. And very quickly we saw incidents of Africans being evicted from their homes and were sleeping rough because hotels wouldn't take them either. And McDonald's had to apologize after it put out a notice banning Black people from entering one of its eateries. So the African community there were subjected to mass testing and quarantine. And local authorities said that they found more than 100 out of the 4,500 or so Africans that they tested. So more than 100 had tested positive. The discrimination and the abuse were pretty intense. And that has prompted African embassies and the African Union to launch diplomatic protests over the treatment of their citizens. China says that it does not tolerate discrimination and that all foreigners are treated the same when it comes to them enforcing these anti-coronavirus measures. But I do think that the incident has definitely put a dent on bilateral relations between Africa and China. And it will be interesting to see whether this will have any sort of long-term repercussions or impact on their bilateral ties going forward, and whether China will, after the pandemic blows over, tighten visa regulations on these Africans coming into China.
Well, thank you so much, Dawn, for those insights. As always, do stay safe. That was our China Bureau Chief in Beijing, Tan Dawn Wei.